friends. A Meade is what he was, Gamaliel Stethington Meade. For a Howe such as I, all you needed to know about a person to call him foe was to know he was a Meade, and the feelings we could be sure would be returned in kind. For as long as anyone could remember, it had been so, unquestioned. Though charity and brotherhood were ever preached from the pulpit on Birchwood Hill, though kindness and generosity were fostered at every hearth, the rift between Howe and Meade possessed a morality of its own. Indeed, for a Howe to scorn a Meade was almost virtue. It was not always so between our two founding families of peaceful old Bell Falls. Once upon a time it was altogether different. When it was almost too late we learned the truth, and it has fallen to me, most gladly do I accept the burden, to explain it. Our great-grandfathers, Gamaliel's and mine, grew up in Bell Falls together, inseparable friends, Ephraim Howe and Nathaniel Meade, cousins, who loved like brothers. Happy and free they roamed the hills and meadows where once Abnaki hunters faced the ruthless Mohawk, fishing the streams, scouting for game. As if warriors of ancient legend, they pledged blood brotherhood, vowing aid and loyalty for life. Straight and tall they grew, working the rocky soil, tapping the maples, tending sheep in the common pasture on the hillsides above Abnack Pond. Defending their flocks, they dreamed of adventure and the bright future they would make together. In the schoolhouse they conspired. Nathaniel was quick at the books, deft with pen and ink, chalk and slate, while Ephraim was champion of the playground, master of stick-pull and tug-of-war. If Nathaniel brought Ephraim through arithmetic and spelling bee, Ephraim was Nathaniel's defender in the yard. If either could have imagined a life apart from the other, he could not have known how to speak the thought. The eyes of all Bell Falls upon them, they grew, faithful sons of the Green Mountains. Until school days left behind, they undertook a task no one before had attempted, the clearing of the hilltop woodland high above Abnack Pond, land their grandfathers had shared, but too rocky and steep for anyone to covet. They worked through season upon season, felling trees, prying stones, preparing land for the plough. Here they would grow thick wheatgrass to feed a dairy herd. For their industry the young men were awarded by the unanimous consent of their kin an astonishing inheritance, not only the land they had cleared, but also joint possession of all property belonging to Howe or Meade, from the falls on the river, right up to the edge of the forest, with perpetual stewardship of Abnack Pond. Ephraim Howe and Nathaniel Meade assumed their stewardship with energy, raising 2 stone houses, wooden porches wide, secure and neat, on opposite sides of the pond. Far enough apart they would jest for good relations, but both with a view of the river, of the sloping meadows of their childhood play, and of the sawmill on the falls. 18 years old and already well proven in the world of men, they bade farewell to the town, to father's rule and mother's care, and set their faces towards the morning sun. Settled in upon either side of Abnack Pond, they made refinements. Ephraim built a milk-house, dug a root cellar, shod his horse. Nathaniel put up shelves for books and fashioned himself a desk and a reading chair. The autumn sun shone approval upon industry and harmony in old Bell Falls, and 2 young friends considered, time for a man to make a choice. Time now, they judged, to lift the eyes and look around, and perhaps under the harvest moon to commence the courting. But timely enough, destiny intervened, in the sudden return of Marguerite Lapointe. Old Bell Falls had never been kingdom enough for her. a vision of raven ringlets in white satin ribbons, of billowing eyelet pinafores sailing in the swing under the great elms in the centre square, a vision of violet eyes under a bonnet's shade, of pinkish rosebud smile. The damp wooden schoolhouse could never contain her. She was too clever, too splendid, too fine. Reading aloud the poems of Mr. Longfellow, dark ringlets falling along her cheeks, her voice was transportation to another realm. Behind the counter in her father's store, an angel in ruffles and lace dispensing maple candy, she made a boy feel ashamed of his homespun clothes and his calloused hands, all the while he thanked heaven for her regard. Spoiled, Nathaniel Meade would mutter, while Ephraim Howe held his breath. At 14, she had gone away to be finished. Now, 18, she returned. They caught sight of her as they lingered together outside the bakery with a good friend, the baker's daughter, Rebecca de Vries. Together they watched, eating hot minced tarts, as the coach brought her in from the train. They watched, the boys brushing crumbs from their coats, Rebecca wiping her hands on her flowery apron, as the coach travelled Main Street, pulling up at the general store. They watched her step lightly down, slim ankle buttoned in black leather, taking her father's hand. The sight took Ephraim's breath. Those slender fingers so dainty in lace glove, that tiny waist a man's two hands could span, those raven ringlets against the snow-white cheeks, a look in those eyes and a manner to set the heart aflame. Spoiled, murmured Nathaniel Meade, while Ephraim Howe held his breath. She must have taken the meaning of his visits, awkward, to her father's store, too frequent, for this and for that, heedless of those who would judge him a fool. She must have borne her father's jests, her mother's mild alarm, peeking through the parlour curtains at the blushing young man pacing to and fro along the white picket fence, pausing every now and then to linger, cap in hand, at the gate. His attentions must have touched her, for she was gracious by all accounts. Did he expect an invitation to tea the day she came down the walk? Did he wait, heart pounding as she strode toward him, for the welcoming sound of her voice? How could he have known, ringing his cap as she stopped, smiling before him, what lay behind her sudden appearing, what mercy, what intention? "Good day to you, Ephraim," the voice of an angel. She carried a leather-bound volume under her arm. "Good day, Marguerite." His soft wool cap was damp in his hands. I wouldn't want to trouble you, Ephraim," she smiled. "No trouble, anything, I mean. I was wondering, could you carry this out to Nathaniel?" She smiled again, extending the book. "He so rarely comes into town." She turned ever so slightly away. "It isn't a gift, mind you, merely a loan." For a moment, while his heart stopped cold in his chest, her eyes searched the cloudy sky. "He was always fond of Dickens," she said at last, to the heavens, "even as a boy." Silent, he took the volume from her perfect, slender white hand, and bearing the leather-bound burden under his arm, Ephraim Howe turned for home. Out from town he trudged, along paths ablaze with autumn, through fields ready for harvest, across the languishing meadow, the noisy geese lighting upon Abnack Pond, along to Nathaniel's side. "She sent it," Ephraim said, reaching his destination at last, extending the book to Nathaniel, standing on the mill-fresh porch of his new stone house. "She asked me to bring it to you." Gladly Nathaniel received the offering, fingering the fine leather, ignorant that his lifelong friend, his other self, was bidding him farewell in his heart. "A tale of two cities," Nathaniel smiled, as if he had been waiting. Like the early frost on the meadow, Ephraim's infatuation with Marguerite Lapointe melted away, or so Nathaniel told himself. And thank heaven for that. Because what would a boisterous fellow such as Ephraim do, after all, with a frail parlour violet such as she? A man of unfailing common sense, Ephraim surely understood, reasoned Nathaniel, who knew him best, that Marguerite Lapointe could never be a fit companion for a man determined to live by the sweat of his brow and the strength of his back. For the exquisite Marguerite, spoiled indeed, lived not on the crude, cold earth, but in the realm of genteel imagination, where life transpired serene. No rude country kitchen for her, stifling in summer, smoky in winter, but a sitting-room well appointed in Springfield or Boston perhaps, where a gentleman, lately of Harvard, read and thought and spoke, and a lady took her leisure in silk, and her tea, brought in by the serving girl, in fine painted porcelain. What good those delicious lace-gloved hands for butter churn or milking pail? Thus settled in his mind, Nathaniel began to contemplate a secret dream of another life, perhaps in another place. In such a mind, Nathaniel Meade permitted himself to be welcomed into the warm, glowing parlour of the family Lapointe, while, at the edge of the woods, beyond the high pasture, Ephraim commenced the war. He worked through the chilly autumn, harvesting stones from the willing ground. He worked on past Thanksgiving, prying stones from the frosting earth. On through the early winter snows he laboured, hauling stones from the massive piles they had cleared together, Ephraim and Nathaniel, to make pasture for their dairy herd. Never mind that an impartial observer might judge that Ephraim's careful wall lay a good 2 rods too far to the east, snaking out a healthy parcel of what might be seen as Nathaniel's share of the land. No boundary had ever been drawn, no division ever contemplated at all. And while a number of Meads took careful exception, and a spattering of Howes wondered how it might end, Nathaniel himself paid no heed. Nathaniel's mind was increasingly elsewhere. If he found himself growing truly fond of Miss Lapointe, it was nothing to be ashamed of. She had many fine qualities, after all, apart from her exceptional beauty. Her Boston education had in fact quite broadened her, and her company, Nathaniel found, was really quite stimulating. As for Ephraim's stubborn refusal to discuss or even acknowledge the matter of Marguerite Lapointe, preferring instead his ridiculous silent obsession with his useless, artless wall, Nathaniel was certain that at any moment the breach would be healed. Ephraim was essential, like memory or breath. A lasting division between them was as unthinkable as the right hand's rejecting the left. At any moment Ephraim, Nathaniel knew, would regain his senses, and all would be well once more. Thus, thoughts full of future and of Marguerite Lapointe, Nathaniel Meade was content.